What if everything you thought you knew about Meghan Markle was a lie? Not a misunderstanding, not just a tabloid twist, but a lie, crafted, curated, and sold to the world like a royal fairy tale with a diamond tiara slapped on top. Because just 3 minutes ago, literally moments before this very recording, her estranged brother, Thomas Markle Jr., dropped a bombshell so jaw-dropping it's already setting fire to the internet. And no, this isn't your typical sibling shade. This is something else entirely. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. He claims he knows exactly what Meghan did before Prince Harry. And not just what she did, but who. Countless men, yacht parties, secret transactions, high-end connections, and now, according to him, receipts. But let's pause. Before we go any deeper into the rabbit hole, let's rewind the tape a little. Because if we're going to pull back the royal curtain and look at what may have been happening behind the scenes, on the yachts, in the shadows, long before the world knew Meghan as a duchess, we need to start with a single, chilling question. Who was Meghan Markle before she became a royal? And why is her own brother the one trying to blow the whistle now? She's been called many things. Actress, activist, princess, pariah. But now, Thomas Jr. is throwing a new label into the ring. Opportunist. A woman who allegedly used her beauty, charm, and ambition to rise through a dark, glamorous, and silent network that connects the wealthy, the powerful, and the untouchable. But why now? Why would a man who shares her last name risk being blacklisted, even further, by the public, the media, and potentially even Meghan's legal team? According to him, I've kept quiet long enough. But people deserve to know the truth about who she really is. Chilling words. And if you're wondering what set him off this time, you're not alone. Because the timing? Suspicious. The stakes? Enormous. And the details? Wildly disturbing. We're talking about a story that begins far away from Buckingham Palace. Long before the wedding dress. Before Oprah. Before Frogmore Cottage. Before all of it, there was a different Meghan. A woman chasing the dream in Hollywood. Hustling. Charming. Navigating a ruthless industry. And allegedly, boarding certain luxury yachts known for things far less innocent than champagne brunches. Now, you've heard whispers, right? Yacht girl. It's a phrase the press won't touch directly, but the internet? Oh, it's flooded with it. Every time a photo resurfaces of Meghan on a sunlit deck in Europe, wearing a tight dress and holding a glass of wine, speculation runs wild. Who paid for the yacht? Who was on board? And who was she entertaining? Of course, no one ever confirms these things. Not publicly, not officially, because this kind of world thrives in silence. But Thomas Jr. just broke that silence. And he didn't just say Meghan was partying or socializing. He claimed she had relationships, plural, with powerful men in exchange for status, luxury, and career opportunities. And here's where it gets darker. He alleges he was there, not on the yacht itself, but in the city during one of her getaways. He claims he saw things, heard things. Things that didn't make sense back then, but make a horrifying kind of sense now. A man exiting her suite at 6 a.m. A camera crew scrubbing raw footage from a party. A whisper about a producer who offered the role of a lifetime in exchange for discretion. But of course, this is all alleged. Thomas Jr. is no stranger to the tabloids himself, and plenty of people have accused him of chasing attention. So you have to ask yourself, is this a bitter brother spewing fiction? Or is this the first real crack in a carefully constructed image? Because here's the thing. This isn't just about Meghan's past. It's about the ripple effect. What happens to a royal family when one of its newest, and most controversial, members is exposed for having potentially lied about her past? What happens to Harry if he finds out he was manipulated? What happens to us, the public, who were sold a fairy tale but may now be staring at the receipts? And that's exactly what makes this moment so terrifying and so electric. Because in a few minutes, we're going to go deeper. We'll examine the names Thomas Jr. claims were on those yacht manifests. We'll reveal the one email that allegedly ties Meghan to a powerful Middle Eastern tycoon. And we'll hear from a former yacht hostess who says she saw Meghan twice. And one time, not in the company of Harry, but of a much older billionaire who gave her a diamond necklace the next morning. Too much? Or not enough? Because here's the twist. The mainstream media? Silent. The royals? Panicked. And Meghan? Nowhere to be found. And yet her brother is standing in front of a camera saying, "She told the world I was toxic, that our whole family was. But the truth is, she's the one who cut all the strings. And now I know why." It's the kind of line that sends a chill down your spine. Not because it's angry, but because it sounds like someone who's done being silenced. But before we go any further, before we peel back the luxury curtain and explore the world of alleged yacht deals, secret liaisons, and NDA-bound romances, let's be clear on one thing. This story isn't just about Meghan Markle. It's about power, about image, about how much truth the public deserves to know about the people they elevate, and what they're willing to overlook if the story feels like a fairy tale. So buckle up. Because this ride is going to be long, messy, controversial, and absolutely addictive. And it all starts on the deck of a yacht, with a woman who knew exactly what she wanted, and a brother who says he knows exactly how she got it. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It all starts on the deck of a yacht, with a woman who knew exactly what she wanted, and a brother who says he knows exactly how she got it. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What makes a man betray his own blood? And perhaps more chilling, what makes a man claim that betrayal is actually the truth the world needs? Because that's exactly what Thomas Markle Jr. is doing. And whether you love or hate him, whether you believe he's a bitter half-brother or a reluctant whistleblower, one thing is certain. He's not backing down. Not anymore. Not after what he claims Meghan did. Not after what he says he saw. And not after what he calls the final slap in the face. But before we get to that moment, the one that pushed him past the edge and into the studio for this bombshell interview, we need to look at the man himself. Who is Thomas Markle Jr.? And why should anyone take what he's saying seriously? Let's go back to the beginning. It's easy to forget now, but there was once a time when Thomas Jr. and Meghan were close. Not just in name, but in proximity. They grew up in the same household. Granted, not for long stretches at a time, but enough. Their father, Thomas Markle Sr., was a respected lighting director in Hollywood. He worked on shows like Married, With Children, and General Hospital, and he was the kind of behind-the-scenes guy who was proud of his craft, but even prouder of his kids. Meghan was his youngest, the daughter from his second marriage, the one he reportedly doted on, bragged about, supported emotionally and financially, especially after her parents divorced. Thomas Jr. was the older sibling. By the time Meghan was entering elementary school, he was already flirting with adulthood. But still, according to neighbors, there was warmth. There were birthday parties, shared Thanksgivings, inside jokes. But something shifted. Somewhere in the fog of Hollywood ambition, family cracks, and Meghan's growing star, that sibling bond fractured. And Thomas Jr.? He became the outsider. Now fast forward to the royal wedding in 2018. The whole world is watching. A biracial American actress is about to marry into the most iconic royal family in history. There are choir singers, celebrities, Oprah, Elton John, cameras everywhere. The world is fawning. And in the background, Thomas Markle Jr. is watching it all unfold from an Arizona motel room. Not Buckingham Palace. Not even the pews of St. George's Chapel. A motel. Because he wasn't invited. Not only that, he claims he didn't even get a heads up. No call. No email. Not even a text from Meghan. Now, put yourself in his shoes for a second. Your sister, the girl you remember as Meggie, is being anointed by the global media as the next Diana. And you, her own brother, are being labeled a fame-hungry embarrassment. Thomas Jr. says it was that moment, sitting on a lumpy motel mattress, flipping through TV channels showing his sister walking down the aisle in a $300,000 Givenchy dress, that something inside him snapped. But what he did next, that's where the story gets messy. Because instead of staying silent, Thomas Jr. wrote a letter, an open letter, to Prince Harry. You may remember the headlines. "It's not too late to call it off," he wrote. He accused Meghan of being jaded, shallow, and conceited. He claimed she was using the royal family like a ladder. He warned Harry that Meghan Markle is obviously not the right woman for you. The world laughed. The tabloids pounced. And Meghan? She cut him off completely. Publicly. Permanently. The Markles, as a family unit, were dead to her after that. But here's where things take a turn. Because Thomas Jr. says the letter wasn't born from jealousy. He says it came from fear. Fear that Meghan was hiding something so big, so dark, that it could eventually take down the monarchy itself. And now, 5 years later, he's ready to explain exactly what he meant. So what's the truth? According to Thomas Jr., the Meghan the world knows isn't the Meghan he remembers. He says she learned very early on how to charm anyone, especially men in power. That it started in high school, escalated in college, and reached a whole new level once she moved to Toronto to film Suits. She was always calculating, he said in the interview. Always 5 steps ahead. Don't get me wrong, she's smart. Brilliant even. But when she saw a shortcut, she took it. And she knew men were her fastest elevator to the top. He pauses. And she was good at it. Now here's where things heat up. Thomas Jr. claims that Meghan's introduction to the yacht scene began not in Europe, but in Los Angeles. An underground circle of private client parties hosted by Hollywood executives and foreign investors. The kind of events where phones were locked at the door, NDAs were signed before appetizers, and the women in attendance were models, actresses, or ambitious unknowns with a willingness to play the game. According to him, Meghan was invited to one such party in 2009, just a few months after a string of auditions that went nowhere. He doesn't say she slept with anyone. Not yet. But what he does say is this. She came home with a purse that cost more than my car. And when I asked her who gave it to her, she just smiled and said, I have friends in high places now. That line stuck with him. Especially years later, when photos started circulating of Meghan on a yacht off the Amalfi Coast. With people no one could name. Wearing jewelry no one could afford. And that's when Thomas Jr. started asking questions. At first, no one wanted to talk. Not her friends. Not her former co-stars. Not even family members who had once adored Meghan. It was like she'd cast a spell, he said. Or maybe they were scared. I don't know. But people who used to gush about her, suddenly they went quiet. But Thomas kept digging. He says he found out about a man. An older, married billionaire from the UAE who had allegedly sponsored Meghan's travel during the summer of 2011. He claims he confronted her about it during a brief family dinner the following Thanksgiving. And what did she say? She looked me dead in the eye and said, Don't ask me things you're not ready to hear. That was the last time they saw each other in person. Fast forward to today. Thomas Jr. has resurfaced with what he claims is evidence. Old emails, bank transfer screenshots, and most shocking, a handwritten note from Meghan to a man only referred to as Jay. I'm not ashamed of who I was, it reads. I did what I had to do. If men can use women for power, then why can't we use them back? Let that sink in for a moment. A private note, allegedly Meghan's handwriting, framed not as regret, but as strategy. Now, of course, none of this has been independently verified. Not the emails, not the note, not the bank records. But here's the thing. Thomas Jr. doesn't seem to care. He says he's already been called every name in the book. A drunk, a loser, a sellout. But this time, he insists, it's not about money. It's about justice. She's fooling the world, he said. And I refuse to stay silent while she rewrites history. He's not asking people to believe him blindly. He's asking them to look closer, to follow the money, to compare the timelines, to connect the dots between a struggling actress and a woman who suddenly landed a prime role in a high-profile series after 2 suspicious yacht trips. He says the truth is right in front of us. But the world has chosen to close its eyes. Until now. Because he's not the only one speaking anymore. And in the next chapter, we'll hear from someone who claims to have seen Meghan in action, not on a set, not on a red carpet, but aboard a yacht in Monte Carlo, where the dress code was designer. The champagne never stopped flowing. And the women weren't just guests, they were assets. But what this yacht hostess reveals, it flips the entire narrative upside down. And what she claims Meghan did that night could change everything. No one's ready for what comes next. What if the story you've been told wasn't just incomplete, but sanitized? What if behind the glowing headlines, the inspirational interviews, and the curated Instagram-worthy smiles, there was a world few dared to speak of? A world where yachts aren't just for sunsets and champagne. They're the stage for transactions, unspoken deals, and quiet power. Because when we say yacht girl, most people laugh it off as a conspiracy or internet slang. But in the elite circles of Monaco, Dubai, and the Greek islands, the term has weight. And the whispers? They've been swirling around Meghan Markle for years. Let's rewind to the summer of 2011. A 29-year-old Meghan Markle was still years away from meeting Prince Harry. At the time, she was best known as Rachel Zane from Suits, a supporting role that gave her a taste of success but hadn't quite launched her into stardom. She was hustling, traveling, networking, and according to several sources, including a former Yacht hostess we'll call Nadia for protection, she was also making appearances at high-end yachting events across the Mediterranean. Now, these weren't your typical luxury cruises or press junkets. These were exclusive, private, invitation-only affairs where discretion was as important as beauty. The yachts? Multi-million-dollar vessels anchored just off the coast of Monaco, St. Tropez, Mykonos, and Amalfi, crewed by professionals, stocked with elite guests, and guarded by men in sunglasses who didn't ask questions. They just checked names and NDAs. Nadia remembers one night clearly, and so does Meghan, because according to Nadia, that was the night everything changed. It was early July, Nadia begins. The sun had just set. We were anchored just off Port Hercules in Monaco. You could see the lights from the casinos glimmering across the water. The yacht belonged to a billionaire. Can't say his name. But he liked to host these summer mixers. Beautiful women, powerful men, no press, no phones. She pauses. That night, Meghan was there. Now here's where things get unnerving. Nadia says Meghan didn't arrive with anyone. She came aboard with two other women, both models, dressed in tight dresses and wearing heels that didn't belong on a deck. She had this presence, Nadia recalls. Not loud, not flashy, just aware. Like she knew the room. Like she already knew who she was going to talk to, what she was going to say, and how to say it. According to Nadia, Meghan was particularly fixated on one guest, a media tycoon from the UK, decades older, married, but known for his generous interest in actresses. They disappeared for almost an hour below deck, Nadia says. When she came back up, she was wearing his cufflinks. Let that image sit with you for a moment. Not because it confirms anything illegal, but because of what it implies. And this isn't just one person's memory. Since Thomas Jr.'s interview broke, 3 other former yacht workers have come forward anonymously, saying they saw Meghan at similar gatherings between 2010 and 2013. Always at luxury ports. Always with someone connected to power. Always blending in, never causing a scene. One crew member claimed Meghan once spent an entire weekend aboard a super yacht in Bodrum, Turkey, accompanied by a Saudi investor who'd later appear on the board of a Hollywood distribution company. Coincidence? Maybe. But the dots keep lining up. Here's another layer. The sudden shift in Meghan's lifestyle around that same time. Pre-2011 Meghan was living modestly in Toronto. Post-2011 Meghan was seen in higher-end fashion, flying business class, and appearing at celebrity events with little explanation as to who was footing the bill. How does a mid-level actress afford a $7,000 Tom Ford handbag? How does she secure meetings with top producers without a major agent? How does she leapfrog from indie flops to VIP charity galas in London and Doha? There are no concrete answers. But the whispers? They point to the yachts. Because that's how the circuit works. You charm the right man. He makes a few calls. Doors open. Roles appear. You move up. And if you're careful, if you never name names, if you never overstay, you disappear into success with no trail. Unless someone speaks. Back to Nadia. She says Meghan was strategic. She wasn't there to party. She was there to position herself. She knew how to lean in at just the right angle, how to touch a man's shoulder when she laughed. It wasn't sleazy, it was professional. Like watching a skilled politician work a room. But one night, Nadia claims she overheard something that made her pause. A conversation between Meghan and another woman, one who'd just flown in from Qatar. According to Nadia, Meghan said, "It's not about being the hottest one here. It's about making him think you're the one who can ruin his marriage quietly." Chilling, and maybe manipulative, but also revealing, because it shows intention, a plan, an understanding of leverage. And when you connect that mentality to her later rise, dating a royal, transforming her brand, controlling the narrative, it all starts to make a certain kind of sense. Of course, the defenders will say, she was just networking. She was single, so what? She's a grown woman. Let her live. And yes, those are fair points. But here's the counterpoint. When you build a public identity around empowerment, honesty, and feminist values, don't you owe the truth? especially when the rise wasn't just talent and timing, but whispers, yachts, and billionaires with secrets, because it changes the story, not just for Meghan, but for Prince Harry, the monarchy, and every fan who believed they were watching a modern Cinderella story. What if it was a calculated campaign from day one? And there's one more bombshell. Nadia says Meghan left the yacht around 3 a.m. with the media tycoon in question. She kissed him on the cheek, held his hand for a moment, and said, "Don't forget your promise." The next week, Meghan appeared in an exclusive magazine profile, her first major feature. The photo shoot, paid for by a private sponsor, the article said, no name listed. And the photographer? Also rumored to have been aboard that yacht. How deep does this go? How many favors were traded? How many names erased? How many stories rewritten? And most of all, what happens when one of those men, the ones who made those promises, decides to talk? Because that's exactly what's about to happen. A former European billionaire, now bankrupt, angry, and no longer afraid, is preparing to speak out. And he claims not only was Meghan a guest, she was his girlfriend, if only for a week. And the secrets he says she told him during that week, if even half of it is true, it could shatter the royal image forever. But don't blink, because the next chapter is about the men, the ones who paid, the ones who stayed quiet, and the ones who didn't. And what one of them is about to reveal. It's not just explosive, it's dangerous. What if the most important part of this story isn't the yachts, but the names whispered on them? Because once you move past the rumors, the photos, the sun-soaked decks and champagne flutes, one question starts to loom larger than all the rest. Who exactly was in those rooms? And why does nobody want their names spoken out loud? This is where things get uncomfortable. Not because anything here has been proven in a court of law, but because the patterns are familiar, and the silence is deafening. So let's be very clear from the start. What you're about to hear is not an accusation. It's a reconstruction of claims, timelines, and accounts from multiple anonymous sources. People who insist they saw Meghan Markle moving through elite circles long before her royal chapter began. And whether you believe them or not, the consistency is impossible to ignore. According to these sources, the guest lists at these yacht gatherings followed a formula. Always powerful men, always insulated by money, lawyers, and reputation, and always surrounded by women who were introduced as actresses, models, or entrepreneurs. Not escorts, not employees, guests. That distinction matters, because it's the gray area where plausible deniability lives. One former event organizer, who asked to remain anonymous, described it like this: "No one ever said, 'You're here to sleep with someone.' That would be crude. Instead, it was framed as access. Opportunity. If two adults liked each other, that was their business." But here's where the contradiction creeps in. These weren't random pairings. The women were often seated deliberately. Introductions were choreographed. And certain men, billionaires, royalty-adjacent figures, producers, were given priority. That's the word that keeps coming up. Priority. Now let's talk about the names. Not specific identities, because no one has gone on record publicly, but categories, patterns, archetypes that repeat again and again across testimonies. First, the financiers. European billionaires, often older, often married, often untouchable. Men who moved between Monaco, Zurich, and Dubai like it was a daily commute. Men whose wealth insulated them from scandal, and whose generosity opened doors. According to two separate sources, Meghan was seen repeatedly in the company of one such figure between 2010 and 2012. Not photographed, not listed publicly, but remembered. He liked actresses, one source said. He liked the idea of discovering someone, mentoring them, making them feel special. Sound familiar? And here's the twist. That same financier later invested in a media fund connected to North American television distribution, right around the time Suits expanded its reach. Coincidence? Possibly. But if you're asking yourself why this keeps coming up, it's because in this world, coincidence is currency. Next, the producers. Hollywood executives with European passports and offshore accounts. Men who could greenlight auditions, push casting decisions, and quietly remove obstacles. According to one former casting assistant, Meghan's name began appearing unexpectedly in rooms she previously couldn't access. She wasn't on the usual lists, the assistant said. Then suddenly, She was. And people would say, she comes highly recommended. But no one would say by who. Highly recommended. That phrase again. And then there are the princes. Not British royalty, let's be precise. Foreign princes. Second or third sons from oil-rich regions. Men who would never inherit thrones, but lived like kings. Several sources insist Meghan crossed paths with at least one such figure at a Mediterranean event. Was it a relationship? A friendship? A brief encounter? No one will say. But one thing is consistent. She was invited back. Now pause for a second and ask yourself something honestly. If a male actor networked his way into elite circles, charmed powerful women, and leveraged those connections to advance his career, would we even be having this conversation? Or is the outrage fueled by something else? Because here's where the narrative gets tangled. Meghan has built a public image centered on empowerment, victimhood, and transparency. She's spoken openly about being underestimated, marginalized, silenced. And yet, if even parts of these accounts are true, it suggests a woman who understood power early and wasn't afraid to navigate it strategically. That contradiction is what makes people uncomfortable. Not sexuality, not ambition, but control. Let's go back to the yacht. One source recalls a night in Mykonos where Meghan sat between a French producer and a Middle Eastern investor during dinner. She barely touched her food, the source said. She listened, asked questions, let them talk. Then at the end, she leaned in and said something that made both of them laugh. What did she say? No one knows. But the next morning, she was invited to a private villa lunch. And the week after that, she had meetings lined up in Paris. That's how access works. Quiet, incremental, untraceable. And here's where the story takes a sharper turn. Because not all the men stayed quiet. One former associate of a now-defunct European conglomerate claims a falling out occurred years later. According to him, Meghan had overpromised discretion and underestimated how bitter powerful men can become when they feel discarded. Strong words. Unverifiable. But telling. Especially when you consider what happened next. That same associate claims a file was compiled. Photos. Travel records. Text exchanges. Not to release publicly, but as insurance. And when Meghan entered the royal orbit, those files suddenly became dangerous. Because now, the stakes weren't career embarrassment. They were diplomatic. Ask yourself this. Why did certain European tabloids go silent on specific stories after 2016? Why did rumored exposés never materialize? Why did editors suddenly lose interest? According to one media insider, pressure was applied. Not from Buckingham Palace directly, but from intermediaries. Lawyers. Fixers. People who understood how to kill stories without killing themselves. And if that's true, even partially, it explains the eerie calm. But silence doesn't mean innocence. It means unresolved tension. And that tension is starting to crack. Because one of the men allegedly linked to these gatherings, no longer rich, no longer protected, is reportedly preparing to talk. Not out of spite. Out of survival. He's got nothing left to lose, a source said. And he's angry. He thinks she used him, then erased him. And when men like that speak, they don't whisper. They burn everything down. So where does this leave us? With a guest list that may never be published. With names that may never be confirmed. And with a public image that looks increasingly curated. Is Meghan Markle a manipulator? A victim of misogynistic rumor-mongering? Or something more complex? A woman who understood the game and played it well, then outgrew it? The truth may sit somewhere in between. But one thing is clear. The yachts were real. The circles were real. And the men? They were very real. And in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something far more dangerous than rumors. Documents, emails, photos, and one forgotten phone that may hold the kind of evidence no PR team can spin. Because if even one of those files becomes public, it wouldn't just damage reputations. It would rewrite history. And nobody is ready for that. What if the truth wasn't buried? What if it was sitting in an envelope, sealed, smudged with time, forgotten in the back of a drawer somewhere in Arizona? What if the proof everyone said didn't exist was never lost? Just ignored? Because in this chapter, we're not dealing with rumors. Not secondhand whispers. Not yacht sightings or anonymous testimony. No, this time, we're talking about physical evidence. A folder, a thumb drive, and, perhaps most haunting of all, a flip phone with a cracked screen tucked inside a manila envelope with the words scrawled in faded marker. Meg. Private. That envelope was in Thomas Markle Jr.'s possession for over a decade. And until now, no one knew. Let's rewind. According to Thomas Jr., the envelope first came into his hands sometime in early 2014. He had just moved into a rental in Medford, Oregon, after a rocky divorce, and was clearing boxes from his old garage in Santa Monica. The envelope was stuffed at the bottom of a crate marked Dad's office. It wasn't sealed, just dog-eared and crumpled. Inside, one old Motorola flip phone, a USB drive with no label, 4 printed photos, 3 torn-up pieces of notebook paper taped back together. At the time, he didn't think much of it. He knew his dad had held on to odd things, scripts, headshots, old production passes. But when he powered on the phone and saw a screensaver image of Meghan from what looked like her deal or no deal days, his stomach dropped. This wasn't just memorabilia. This was personal. The phone itself was basic. No passcode. Just a dated interface with blurry thumbnails and a broken calendar app. But the contents? They were specific. Over 40 photos stored locally. Multiple texts to a contact named JL. And one draft message never sent, titled simply, "You said I'd be safe." Thomas Jr. didn't share everything from that phone. Not yet. But he did reveal key pieces in his latest tell-all. Let's start with the photos. The 4 printed images were glossy, slightly faded, and clearly printed from a home device. Photo 1. Meghan on a yacht, wearing a white bikini and oversized sunglasses, seated beside a bald man in a blue blazer whose face is partially obscured. Photo 2. Meghan standing on the dock, holding a champagne glass, smiling at someone off camera. Framed between 2 black luxury SUVs. Photo 3. Meghan on what appears to be a private jet, reclining with a silk blanket over her lap, grinning toward the camera. Photo 4. A close-up selfie. Meghan, makeup-free, lying on white sheets. The timestamp says 3:17 a.m., but no location data is visible. No nudity. Nothing explicitly scandalous. But the tone? Intimate. Unpublished. Untraceable. And according to Thomas Jr., these were taken during a summer of silence. A gap in Meghan's timeline between seasons of Suits where she reportedly vanished off-grid. No paparazzi shots. No social media posts. Just silence. Until now. Then, there was the USB drive. Encrypted, initially unreadable without a password. Thomas says it took months to crack with help from a tech-savvy friend. And when they finally opened it, they found a folder titled June Clients. Inside, 11 subfolders, each labeled with initials. MT, JK, NA, HS, and more. What were these? Clients of what? Why would Meghan, or someone close to her, have these files? Here's where it gets darker. Each subfolder contained a photo. Sometimes 2. Nothing explicit, but every image showed Meghan smiling beside a man in a private setting. Lounges, back seats, balconies, pools. Were these lovers? Mentors? Business partners? Or something else entirely? Thomas wouldn't confirm. But one name stood out. JK. According to royal gossip circles, this could point to a known Hollywood executive with deep ties to European finance. A man rumored, though never proven, to have funded discreet celebrity retreats, high-end gatherings, and, yes, yacht excursions. And in that JK folder? One photo, one text screenshot, and one document, titled simply, Rate Sheet. The rates weren't for services. They were budgets. $5,000 appearance fee, $2,500 travel stipend, $1,000 per DM. Extras discretionary. Professional? Possibly. Transactional? Definitely. And that's what makes it so explosive. But let's talk about the real ghost in the envelope. The note. Torn, taped, and angry. It reads like the beginning of a confrontation that never happened. You said I'd be safe. You promised no phones. You said if I kept quiet, I'd get the cover and the brand deal. But now I'm seeing my name whispered on forums, and your wife called me a messy little threat. I am not your secret. I am the reason your friends take your calls. Powerful words. Not signed. But the handwriting? According to 2 graphology experts brought in by independent bloggers, it matches Meghan's. Now, this doesn't prove guilt. It doesn't confirm scandal. But it does raise questions. Who was she writing to? And what happened after that note was written? Because if someone promised her protection and failed, that may explain the chilling caution that followed. The careful interviews, the media training, the rapid rebranding from actress to activist to royal, and maybe even the distance from her own family. Thomas Jr. says he kept the envelope buried because he didn't want to be that guy. But after being repeatedly called a liar, a grifter, and a half-sibling parasite, his words, not ours, he changed his mind. If she wants to pretend I never existed, fine, he said. But the truth doesn't vanish just because it's inconvenient. He hasn't released the entire envelope contents publicly yet, but according to him, that time is coming. And if what's in that phone becomes public, we won't just be talking about Meghan's image. We'll be talking about legal liability, media complicity, and a royal marriage built on a past that was never truly disclosed. So ask yourself, what's more dangerous, rumor or proof? Because for years, critics have been dismissed as trolls. Every mention of Yacht Girl history was labeled sexist, hateful, conspiratorial. But this envelope, this forgotten little folder in a box in Oregon, might be the one thing that blows the whole narrative wide open. But it's not just what's inside that matters. It's what's missing. Because one of those subfolders, one labeled HR, was empty. Just a single file, deleted. And the file name? Proposal, London, Autumn. What was it? Who deleted it? And what was proposed in London that fall? Before Meghan ever met Prince Harry? That's what we explore next. Because someone else saw that file. And they say it wasn't a business proposal. It was a plan. What would it cost to make someone forget the past? To erase a weekend? A photo? A whispered name on a yacht? What's the market rate for silence in a world where image is everything? Because in this chapter, we follow the money. And when you do that, the story gets darker, faster, and far more organized than anyone wants to admit. This isn't just about relationships. It's about risk management, damage control, payouts, and a paper trail that's harder to hide than anyone expected. Let's start with the word no celebrity ever wants associated with their name. NDA, non-disclosure agreement. It's become a buzzword, tabloid candy. But in elite social circles, NDAs are standard. They're not just legal shields, they're cultural norms. You enter the party? You sign. You sit at the VIP table? You sign. You board the yacht? You already know. And according to 3 separate legal consultants familiar with high-profile entertainment contracts, Meghan Markle was no stranger to NDAs even before the Suits era. She wasn't the biggest star, one consultant explained, but she was moving in circles where reputations were currency. The men she allegedly connected with? They didn't rely on trust, they relied on paper. So what does that mean? It means Meghan may have signed multiple NDAs during her rise. And not all of them were tied to roles or studios. Some were allegedly tied to individuals. High net worth men, producers, business tycoons, men who had something to lose if their private engagements ever became public. But here's the twist. It wasn't just Meghan who may have signed NDAs. According to leaked communications now circulating in certain journalistic circles, she also issued them. Yes, you read that right. One source, who claims to have worked briefly as an assistant to a Los Angeles-based crisis PR firm in 2015, recalls a client referred to only as MM, who requested templated NDAs for personal brand protection. The documents, the source says, were meant for former stylists, social acquaintances, drivers, romantic partners. One of the clauses reportedly included a fine of $250,000 for any defamation via implication, even if no names were used. Aggressive? Absolutely. But effective. Because not one of Meghan's alleged VIP acquaintances has ever gone on record. Not a single romantic partner. Not one former companion. Not one service staff member who claims anything inappropriate ever happened on those yachts. Silence across the board. And when the silence is that loud, you start to wonder what's behind it. Now let's talk about the money. Because NDAs are only as powerful as the incentives or threats behind them. And that brings us to the payouts. There's no publicly confirmed record of Meghan Markle issuing hush money. That's important to state clearly. But there are financial movements in her early career that raised eyebrows, even before Thomas Jr.'s recent bombshell. Let's break it down. Between 2010 and 2013, Meghan's public income streams were modest. Supporting roles, game show appearances, minor sponsorship deals. Yet during that same period, she was photographed with a Cartier love bracelet, $6,000, a Chanel tote bag for $1,500, and on one occasion, boarding a private jet from Nice to Ibiza, a flight that typically runs $18,000 one way. So who paid? Fans argue. Maybe a generous boyfriend. Maybe a comp trip. Maybe early success. But sources close to Meghan's estranged uncle Michael Markle claim she received off-the-books gifts from several male benefactors during this time. She always called them sponsors, one alleged friend stated anonymously. Not in a sketchy way, just as a code word. If she said she had dinner with a sponsor, we knew not to ask. But one of those sponsors, according to Thomas Jr., may not have gone quietly, and the fallout from that situation allegedly resulted in a payout. Let's circle back to the missing file on the USB stick from the last chapter, the one labeled Proposal, London, Autumn. A former Soho House employee, who insists they saw an early version of that file, claims it wasn't about business or romance. It was about strategy. Specifically, the file contained a reputation risk breakdown. It outlined 3 scenarios. Public exposure of Meghan's past connections with certain men. Rumors re-emerging during a high-profile relationship, unnamed but assumed to be Harry. A hostile narrative pushed by disgruntled insiders. The solution? A multi-pronged strategy. Legal, reinforce NDAs. Financial, offer quiet settlements in exchange for updated agreements. Narrative, preemptively frame estranged family members as unreliable. If true, this file wasn't just a contingency plan. It was a calculated roadmap. And here's where it gets even messier. According to this same insider, the plan was executed almost exactly as outlined, down to the public statements. Think about it. Who was the first person the media turned against during Meghan's rise? Her family. Thomas Sr., painted as a sellout. Samantha Markle, dismissed as jealous. Thomas Jr., branded a walking tabloid. But what if that public distancing wasn't just emotional, but tactical? What if silencing family wasn't about shame, but control? And what if certain other voices, men who could contradict the Duchess's narrative, were offered something stronger than scorn? Money. Because the only thing more effective than fear is a wire transfer. Let's consider one particularly compelling clue. A British tabloid source, someone who spent years covering celebrity scandals, claims a former Yacht guest was prepared to speak out about Meghan in 2017. He was contacted for a feature story, agreed to talk, provided preliminary info. Then suddenly, nothing. Story killed. Source vanished. No follow-up. When pressed, the tabloid's editor reportedly said he got cold feet, said he signed something, and that she'd already taken care of him. Taken care of? That phrase again. There's another name worth mentioning, Marcus Anderson. The mysterious Soho House executive who's credited with introducing Meghan to Prince Harry. Some say he's just a friend. Others say he was the gatekeeper, the man who managed introductions, reinforced boundaries, cleaned up behind the scenes. Multiple sources suggest Marcus helped secure NDAs on Meghan's behalf in the months leading up to her public royal debut. And one former staffer even claims she overheard him say, "She's about to be untouchable." So let's tidy the past before someone else does. Was he joking? Was he managing a PR campaign? Or was he erasing people? We may never know. But here's what we do know. When someone signs an NDA, when someone takes a settlement, when someone deletes a file or vanishes from the narrative, that doesn't mean nothing happened. It just means it won't be discussed. Not on the record, not in court, not in the headlines. Which is exactly how these stories survive, until someone cracks. And according to a new leak, one of Meghan's former benefactors is about to crack wide open. A man once protected by an ironclad NDA. Now broke. Now angry. Now subpoenaed. Because this time, it's not just gossip. It's tied to Meghan's visa status. And the lawyers want answers. Next chapter? We're talking FBI files, drug allegations, conflicting testimony, and a mysterious video that may have never been destroyed. What's on the tape? You're about to find out. If Meghan Markle was the chessboard, then Marcus Anderson was the gloved hand moving every piece into place. You've probably heard his name in passing, maybe seen him in a few blurry background photos. Or maybe you didn't notice him at all, because that's how he works. Quiet, calculated, everywhere, and nowhere. But the deeper we go into the story of Meghan's past, the more one name keeps surfacing, not among the yacht guests or former lovers, but behind the velvet curtain. Marcus Anderson. Not a boyfriend, not a stylist, not a publicist, something more dangerous, a connector. And if what insiders are saying is true, he wasn't just part of Meghan's rise. He was the architect. Let's start with the basics. Who is Marcus Anderson? He's a senior executive at Soho House, an exclusive members-only club known for its A-list clientele, ultra-curated access, and ironclad privacy rules. With outposts in London, Toronto, New York, Istanbul, and beyond, Soho House is less a hangout and more a power grid, a social incubator for creatives, moguls, and the ultra-influential. And Marcus? He's referred to internally as the fixer, a man who knows which guests should meet at what table and how long their drinks should be poured before they shake hands. And long before Meghan became a duchess, before she ever met Prince Harry, she was a regular at Soho House Toronto. Who got her in? Marcus. They were close. Very close. So close, in fact, that during Meghan's early press blitz, reporters repeatedly asked if they were dating. They weren't. But insiders say their bond ran deeper than any romantic label. He protected her, one source close to the club told us. He introduced her to the right people, made the bad ones disappear, and kept her off the radar when she needed to reset her image. Off the radar. That phrase keeps surfacing. Because if you wanted to rewrite your past, there was no better place to do it than Soho House. No photos allowed. No press leaks tolerated. No questions asked. And that's where the real story begins. Marcus didn't just introduce Meghan to Soho House. He allegedly opened doors in London, Dubai, and New York, the same cities connected to the yacht rumors, elite parties, and the hush-hush VIP circles we've discussed in previous chapters. Former members say they saw Meghan attending invite-only dinners hosted by tech billionaires, Hollywood studio heads, and even foreign dignitaries. She wasn't a wallflower. She was magnetic, one former Soho House guest said. But she didn't come to play. She came to win. And according to a staffer at Soho House Istanbul, Meghan once arrived to a closed-door gathering just minutes before a Saudi royal's entourage pulled up. She knew exactly who she was sitting next to before the appetizers hit the table, the staffer said. Marcus made sure of it. But why Marcus? Why would one man go to such lengths to elevate Meghan Markle? Some say loyalty. Others say ambition. But one theory is gaining traction. They had a pact, a mutual understanding. Marcus, with the keys to elite circles and discretion-based power. Meghan, with charisma, ambition, and a face ready for global headlines. He would get her in. She would rise. And together, they would leverage every rung of that ladder. Sounds far-fetched? Until you hear about the London strategy session. According to an insider, who once worked at the front desk of Soho House Dean Street, Marcus and Meghan held a meeting in fall 2016 with two men described as brand architects. It lasted nearly 4 hours. No press, no security, just 4 people. Closed doors. After that meeting, everything changed. Meghan's interviews shifted in tone. Her fashion was suddenly front-page ready. She made calculated visits to charities, attended elite galas in London, and, within weeks, met Prince Harry. Coincidence? Or plan? Because according to leaked messages, Marcus sent this text to a colleague shortly after that fateful meeting. She's ready. He won't know what hit him. He, as in, Harry? The palace has never commented publicly on Marcus Anderson. They treat him like a footnote. But insiders say his influence didn't stop after the couple went public. He was everywhere, one former royal aide said. He flew with them, advised on outfits, whispered in ears before press appearances. He wasn't on the payroll, but he had full access. In fact, it's rumored that Marcus helped vet Meghan's media requests, and that he had a hand in reshaping her image before the Oprah interview. If true, that makes him one of the most influential unelected voices in royal history. And yet, he has no official title, no bio, no oversight, just connections, and the ability to vanish when things get hot. Now, remember that envelope from Thomas Jr.? The one with the deleted file labeled Proposal, London Autumn? According to a tech source familiar with the folder's recovery, metadata showed the original file was created on a device previously linked to an IP address registered at Soho House, London. And not just any location, Marcus Anderson's private office. So what was in that file? What kind of proposal was it? We don't know. But a leaked message from the same week, sent to a private PR strategist in New York, reads, "We need a full audit of her digital past. Focus on Yacht mentions, early IMDb credits, and scrub." Scrub, another code word for erase, reformat, bury. And that's when rumors of the video started circulating. According to two separate sources, one a former assistant to a Middle Eastern diplomat, the other a retired film tech. There was once a recording, not explicit, but compromising. A conversation between Meghan and a high-profile benefactor aboard a yacht. Nothing illegal, but loaded with implications. The video showed champagne, a financial promise, and Meghan saying, "I'm not for sale, but I'm smart enough to know how this works." Allegedly, Marcus helped retrieve the video. Allegedly, he oversaw its deletion. Allegedly, he threatened legal action if it ever surfaced again. But here's the twist. One of the techs involved in that deletion? He kept a backup. Why? Because Marcus never paid the second half of the cleaning fee. And now, that backup may be in the hands of lawyers. Because Meghan's visa application is under quiet scrutiny. If that video contains anything suggesting undisclosed income, transactions, or sponsorships, it could become federal evidence. And guess who's being asked to testify? Marcus Anderson. So what happens now? What happens when the man who curated the Duchess's rise is pulled into a legal web of secrecy, surveillance, and possibly perjury? What happens when a fixer becomes a liability? Because according to legal documents circulating in closed court filings in Washington, D.C., Marcus may be compelled to answer under oath. No press, no cameras, but very real consequences. And if Marcus flips? If he talks? Then the entire domino trail, from yachts to NDAs to staged introductions, could come crashing down, including Meghan's most powerful shield, the royal marriage. But before that happens, there's one story that no one has dared touch until now. The obsession, the diary entries, the middle school essays where Meghan imagined being a princess. Not just any princess, Diana. And in the next chapter, we dive into Meghan's royal fixation, how long it's been simmering, how calculated it became, and what she allegedly told a former boyfriend in 2012. If I can't marry royalty, I'll make the world treat me like I did. What if the fairy tale wasn't an accident? What if it wasn't fate or romance, or a whirlwind modern love story? What if it was the result of a blueprint, a quiet, persistent obsession that had been smoldering since childhood? Because long before she met Prince Harry, long before the world dubbed her the new Diana, Meghan Markle was already crafting a fantasy. Not about love, but about power, about status, about the crown. And to understand how deep that ambition ran, you have to go back, not to Soho House, not to Hollywood, but to a teenage girl in a school library, clutching a biography of Anne Boleyn. Yes, that Anne Boleyn, the original royal disruptor, the commoner who bewitched a king, changed a country, and lost her head trying to rewrite the rules. And according to classmates, Meghan idolized her. Let's be clear, this isn't about random fangirling. This is about patterns, recurring signs. Stories Meghan told that now feel less like fiction and more like foreshadowing. One former classmate at Immaculate Heart High School in Los Angeles recalls Meghan's English essay titled, "Common Girls, Royal Dreams." In it, she analyzed the lives of Anne Boleyn and Princess Diana. Her thesis? That both women used charisma and courage to challenge the monarchy's traditions, and that society feared women who could command both empathy and headlines. That's not your typical teenage paper. But it didn't stop there. A drama teacher says Meghan once chose Anne Boleyn for a historical monologue project, complete with a faux royal accent and a speech that ended with, "They think they can control me because I wasn't born noble, but I will make them remember my name." Years later, that line would feel hauntingly familiar, especially when a Real palace found itself trying to manage the woman who married their prince. But here's where it starts to move from fascination to fixation. In college, Meghan reportedly kept a vision board, a cork board filled with magazine cutouts, quotes, and goals. One source from her dorm says there was a photo of Princess Diana pinned to the center. Beside it, the phrase, "Impact over obedience." The same words she would use in interviews years later, phrased differently, perhaps, but always echoing the idea that following the rules was not her destiny. And who was guiding that vision? Not her mother, not an agent, not a friend. It was history, and the women who changed it by stepping directly into the fire. Let's talk about Diana. Meghan has claimed she didn't grow up knowing much about the royal family, that she didn't understand what marrying Harry would mean. But multiple people from her early life say otherwise. I remember she cried watching Diana's funeral, said a neighbor. She wasn't just sad, she was angry. Said the press killed her. Said she'd never trust the media if she were famous. Another high school friend recalls Meghan practicing a curtsy in the mirror after watching The Princess Diaries. She said if she ever met a prince, she'd already be 2 steps ahead. That's a quote. 2 steps ahead. And in 2010, years before Harry, years before Suits became a hit, Meghan allegedly told a friend during a group vacation, "If Kate can do it, why not me? But smarter. Smarter. Not luckier. Not kinder. Not more in love. Smarter." It wasn't just admiration. It was comparison. Positioning. And that changes the lens entirely. Now, some might say, so what? Lots of girls dream of being a princess. Lots of women admire Diana. It doesn't mean they're scheming to infiltrate Buckingham Palace. Fair point. But here's what makes Meghan different. She didn't just dream the dream. She pursued the mechanisms to make it possible. Let's walk through them. A curated resume, from fringe actress to cable drama lead. Calculated friendships, including elite socialites, stylists, and influencers tied to the British scene. The Marcus Anderson connection, placing her in rooms with royalty-adjacent figures. A move to London right before her fateful encounter with Prince Harry. And a rapid rebranding into the image of a global humanitarian with style. Echoing, eerily, the Diana effect. Coincidence? Or calculation? Because one former boyfriend from Meghan's Los Angeles days claimed she often said, "If I'm going to change the world, I'll need a platform. A real one. And a man with a title doesn't hurt." Let that sink in. So when she finally did meet Harry, was it destiny? Or was it the final act of a long orchestrated plan? According to a source close to Soho House, London, Meghan knew she was going to that dinner weeks in advance. She planned the outfit down to the scent she wore, the insider said. Not in a desperate way, in a professional way. Like someone preparing for a screen test. And when the two connected, she made him feel like he was the lucky one. Sound familiar? Because that's the Bullen playbook. Charm the crown. Stoke the ego. Make him believe you're the only one who sees him. And then, take your seat at the table. Let's go even deeper. In 2015, Meghan wrote a now-archived blog post on the TIG, her former lifestyle site. The topic? Duchess Kate. She praised Kate's poise, her style, her grace under pressure. But then came the twist. Little girls dream of becoming princesses. I, for one, was busy being Chiara, the princess of power. But adult women dream of impact. That line was widely quoted. But here's what didn't get attention. A footnote at the end of the post, referencing a book she was reading. And Bullen, Fatal Attractions. It's subtle, but it's there. And it sends a message. Meghan didn't want to be a fairy tale princess. She wanted to be the disruptor queen. And the only question left is, was Harry the goal? Or the final tool? Because according to someone very close to the situation, a person who once traveled with Meghan during her Suits promotional tour, there was a moment, quiet and offhand, that never sat right with them. They were in a hotel lounge. Meghan was scanning her phone, sipping tea. The royal wedding of William and Kate had just aired a few days earlier. And she said, "She's locked in now. But I'd never let them cage me like that. Them. The firm. The crown." It was casual, almost dismissive. But now, years later, in the context of everything, the ambition, the maneuvering, the symbolism, it feels prophetic. So let's ask the real question. Was Meghan's marriage a love story or a power story? A woman who studied the royals like a playbook, idolized their most rebellious figures, maneuvered herself across oceans and industries to land in the very heart of the institution she claimed not to understand? A woman who quoted Bullen, worshipped Diana, and told a friend in 2012, "If I can't wear the crown, I'll at least make them bow." Because next, we move from speculation to suppression. Because once Meghan got in, that's when the cleanup started. And in the next chapter, we follow the trail of scrubbed stories, altered timelines, and mysterious media silence, all engineered to erase her past and protect the new persona. But not everyone played along, and the ones who didn't started disappearing.